Good evening. It is 6:30 and it is time for our Community Development Advisory Council meeting for today, September 2nd.
October.
Oh, sorry, October 2nd. Whew. Sorry, it's been a busy time at work. October 2nd. All right, let's start off with a roll call.
Yeah.
Well, you are
Ex officio.
ex
Kenya,
officio.
Kenya Middleton, Second District, Council ex officio.
Thank you.
John Brunza, mayoral appointee.
Mary Ann Callahan, mayoral appointee.
Michelle O'Loughlin, council at large.
Marilyn Austin, sixth district.
Jordan Trice, fifth district.
And I'm Justin McGregor, the chair, 7th District. All right. So has everyone seen the minutes that were emailed out to everybody from the September 4th meeting? Do we have any motions? Do we have any discussion?
I'll make a motion
Do we have
to
a
pass the minutes from our September 4th, 2024 meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
John seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Yay, unanimous. All right, so according to the agenda, we have Binghamton data presentation. Stephen, would you like to give us the details?
Yeah, so we started this last year and it went over pretty well. So we updated it again for this year. So the point of this presentation is to basically give the CDAC data, just information. What is the state of the city? And I'm not saying that in a political way, like a state of union or the state of the city the mayor may give. This is simply what's going on in the city. What are our raw numbers? If anyone can kind of, because I'll be doing this, if anyone can kind of keep looking up there in case anyone shows up, and I'll go and let them in. So anyway, it's a little bit of a dry one. It shouldn't take too long, but if you have any questions, absolutely ask for each slide if there's an issue or something. I'll just let you know that throughout the presentation, if you see a little up arrow next to the number, that means the number is up from last year. If you see a little down arrow or a V, that means the numbers have dropped from last year. In almost all cases, except for one, and I'll point that out when we get to it, the numbers, it's like a slight shift. So it's not a real big deal. I don't want to say it's not a big deal because these numbers are important, but it's not like any number went from 20% to 5% or anything like that. All right, so we'll start off with the population, and that always asks the question, who lives here? Well, according to 2022 American Community Survey, and that's the 5-year survey that the Census Bureau does, and that's the latest one we have access to. The population of the city is 47,617, slightly down from last year. Approximately 19% of the population is disabled in some way, and that is heavily correlated to age. So disability will include mobility and vision limitations. And that's slightly down from last year. Possibly, I don't want to have conjecture on the reason why. The other thing, like I said, is it's possibly age-related, and our older population may be shrinking. Approximately 2% of the population have limited English speaking in their household. That is slightly up from last year, indicating an influx of quite probably refugees or migrants from countries where English is not that it's not taught, but that they didn't pick up the English proficiency. So of those limited English speaking households, 13% are Spanish speakers, 28% are Asian Pacific Islander, and the rest are what is called Indo-European, and it's the non-Spanish. My guesstimation on that one would be refugees from the Ukraine, from Afghanistan, would probably be that sort of population, which is about 60% of the limited English speaking at home. Just keeping an eye up there. Majority population. So the majority population is defined as those who are white only and are non-Hispanic or Latino, like me. The inverse of the majority's population is, by definition, the minority population. In other words, all those who are one or more race that is not white only and or Hispanic Latino according to the census. So these numbers will always, be inverses of each other. The majority population is at 66% and the minority population is 34%. It appears in the last year that the minority population is slightly increased, indicating a diversification of our population. The elderly population has increased, so I'm probably wrong about what I had said earlier about the elderly population. It is now at 24% of the overall population. Children make up 19% of that population, and that has gone down slightly. And then the next thing, I'm going to show you the population pyramid. The university absolutely skews the population numbers for college age residents. And that's our population pyramid. I'm going to say it's difficult to tell and analyze this. Oh, and I added the generations. So I don't know, there's so much generational talk. I figured I'd throw it in there. You can see clearly there the 20 to 24-year-olds, the 25 to 29s, that just those two giant things there absolutely skew that population. So it's difficult to assess the native Binghamtonian residents that are not students because of that. But in general, what you're seeing is for essentially the baby boomers and older, a standard pyramid shape with slight expansion to the top, mainly because that's not limited. It's 85 plus. And then it's pretty much a straight population down, although, there's fluctuations. Generally, that indicates a population stagnation, from what I remember from my coursework. But this is fairly typical for the United States. Larger baby boomer population, baby boomers didn't have as many kids, Generation X didn't have as many kids, so on. So it's difficult to say if people are having enough kids. I don't know how one makes an analysis of that, but the youngest section, so basically children under the age of 9, is the smallest part of the population, and I don't know how normal that is compared to the rest of the country. So then geography. Where do people live? How do they live where they live? So with HUD funds, we can do a geographic focus, and I've mentioned this before. Oh, hold on. You guys want to talk, and I'll go take care of this?
I would just like to note that census estimates on off years have been off by roughly 19% the last 3 censuses, whereas the previous year Binghamton gets killed by the estimates. And then when the actual census is taken, when they go door to door, we're not where they thought we were. And they've undercounted us in every census since 1980. Yeah, I think part of it has to do with the fact that the estimates are done in January, February, and the census is actually walked in the summer. And a lot of people forward their mail because the estimates are done via mail delivery and et cetera. And a lot of people are snowbirds and they forward their mail and we get hit.
So what I missed the part about the skewing. How is it? What's the skew you're talking about?
The estimates have undercounted Binghamton and Broome County every year leading up to a census significantly. And it happens all across the Rust Belt in the north because so many people go south.
Yeah.
And we have a problem with the Board of Elections too, where people forward their mail incorrectly and it looks like they've moved to Florida instead of they're just temporarily in Florida because they want to get all their junk mail and magazines forwarded without having to do each one of them.
So then would you recommend, say, taking with a grain of salt the 60 plus, sort of the baby boomer to the silent generation up as being undercounted in general? Because those would be the people that would be probably doing the most moving of that.
Yep.
So that's probably undercounted there. So that's probably even wider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you're also going to be skewed in the middle where the college students, because the college students are here in February and then they're not in March. So when it comes to the actual census, they play a lesser role than they do in the estimates.
So let me get you correct on this. You're saying that bar should be even wider?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
When it comes to the actual census, that bar will be in and the
Oh,
bar will be wider up here and
Okay.
in here. It'll be
Alright.
more uniform. than
Alright.
it actually is there.
So we do have to work with the data we have. but
Yes.
That is good. That is good to know.
But if you compare the estimate years to the actual census years when the actual data comes out, you'll every single time since 1980, you're going to see the same shape. It's incredible. And it cost New York State a Congress seat.
Oh,
54 people is the difference between New York having lost a seat and not. And they blame it on the fact that the estimates are done in January, February, and not in the summer.
the population, so almost all the data I'm going to use is going to come from what's called the American Community Survey. So the census is done every 10 years. The American Community Survey is done annually, but it's sort of a rolling average. And so instead of sending out a census, everyone gets a census form. Only a certain select population, I'd say select, a random selection of the population gets the ACS form to fill out. So that basically is calculation. That's a calculation of what they think has happened since the last census. So that's how that's determined.
Before you continue, I want to acknowledge that Deborah has joined us. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you,
And
gentlemen. I appreciate it.
I will
Thank
bring
you.
this up to you in a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, so going to geography. Okay, so I mentioned before that in general, we do not focus on specific geographic areas for any HUD funding. That is an option you do have available. We are talking about working on the consolidated plan. So if you chose to say target an area, a neighborhood, a district, that option is available to you. However, be aware that how do I say this delicately? There may be pushback if certain representatives want their district to get funding. They may feel like they're being underfunded, and that makes sense. That I understand that argument. Our HUD rep, who actually she has changed. We've got a new HUD rep, but our previous HUD rep actually told me Buffalo, their council took pride in not getting HUD funding in their districts. So council members took pride in that because they thought their districts were doing great. I said that's great, but I don't think Binghamton's in that position yet to start wanting to not have CDBG money or area. So currently we fund across the city. There are sort of two broad areas where generally funds are not spent just because of population demographics. Most of the second district, and I'll show you on the next map, and then sections of the 5th, 6th, and 7th district, and I'll show you those. So you will periodically hear from people who I've not managed to beat them out of saying it anymore, calling these the blue areas CDBG eligible areas, because for a long time, I believe the idea was as long as your project was in the blue area, you were good to go. No, your service area needs to be mostly blue, but individuals, it depends on the project. Individual programs could be located over here on the west side, but it serves a low-income population, so it could be eligible. So the area in and of itself may or may not utilize this to reflect whether it's eligible or not. So it's very much nuanced, and it's based off of overall what the project's doing. However, I can tell you one of the best ways of looking at it is if you look at parks. If the park is generally, you're looking at each park, we've defined the park service areas as half mile to be local parks or neighborhood parks. And that applies to all parks other than Ross. And I don't know if this is counted on here. Where is, oh, now I'm lost. I don't have the river. I don't know if they include the stadium. The stadium is sometimes included in the park stuff. Okay, that's not eligible. Those are regional things. So there you go. All right. I need the river. It's
I can see my house right
I'm hydrologically biased.
I'm not in the zone.
So anyway, if you draw a half-mile circle around the edges of the parks, that'll tell you whether, and that area is predominantly low income, that will tell you whether the park is eligible. Almost all the parks in the city are eligible. Ross Park is not because it's regional. NYSEG Stadium is not because it's regional. I forget what this is called. The Sten Park?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not eligible. Yeah, this one right here. Because if you draw a half mile circle around it, you're not going to have mostly LMI people around there. There's not a lot of blue around there. Does that make sense? Oh. Your service area. Okay, so look at this park here. I don't even know what this, anyone know? Okay. Whatever this park is, if we drew a service area around here of a half a mile around the edges, you can see it's pretty much mostly blue. That indicates that the blue is low income areas. It is the low mod. It's areas in which higher than 50% of the population is considered a low mod household. And so for service area projects or service area programs, like a park rehab or anything like that, you have to have a service area that is predominantly low income residential. So West End wouldn't be. We can't count Johnson City, even though they have some low income. So we'd have to draw it here. And unfortunately, that's not, when you add up the numbers, it's not low income. Another one that is out is Fairview Park. Again, for the same way, when we draw that half mile, it's like, I think it's like 48 point something, but not enough to just get over that HUD eligibility thing. So, yeah.
When in regards to the whole big purple swath to the right of Fairview Park there, where it's basically the majority of that is the health campus.
Yeah.
How do they justify that being blue?
It's based off of the people that live with it. So this is, I believe this is based off block group data. So it's going to be based off of, if you take the block group, you take the entire population that lives within there, you take the total or you take the amount that's low mod divided by the total. And if that exceeds 50%, it'll be blue. But that's on a block group by block group level. There are sections that might be like 5 people live there, but as long as 3 people are low income, that's a low income area.
So the people actually in state hospital count towards that.
Possibly. I don't know the specifics. That's more of like, since I don't know how the census gathers that information. I just know because HUD doesn't care. They want to see it. You show me the numbers. And so we do it. I do have all the block groups. I had to do this whole math thing. I do it every census, and it basically does this for every block group. Every park has X number of block groups attached to it, based off of the GIS. And I throw the numbers in there, and I can spit out how many parks are LMI eligible and how many aren't. And I pass that on to the Parks Department so they know. So like I said, most of them are in. There's a few that are out. And I think I pointed out most of them. I want to say there's like a trail over here, like a biking trail that's out too, but it's not visible here. So anyway, any other questions about the low mod areas? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into more of actual demographics. This data is terrible, these maps are terrible mainly because I don't have access to GIS. I had to use the HUD Exchange GIS for that. So the dark blue is that percentage of the population, the highest percentage of the population that is white only, non-Hispanic or Latino, or as I call the majority population, you could say the non-minority population. So you can see where they are: west side, south side, northeast side. So we get more diverse when we get into, the downtown area. But the most diverse are probably here. Let's see here. So this is the Robinson Street district, or Robinson Street area over there. Parts of the downtown, including this building, North Street, and then going up Main Street. So those are the most diverse parts of the city. And mind you, this is all relative. What's diverse in Binghamton is not going to be the same as what's diverse in Los Angeles, or what's diverse in New York City, or what's diverse in something of a 5 population area of Kentucky. So, so this is median household incomes. White is sort of the highest. Oh, wait, sorry, no, white is the lowest. So, and so when you compare it, and this is regionally, I didn't break down the categories. This is the data I was able to get from the HUD Exchange. you can see again, this does sort of map where the minority population is as well, unfortunately. And I do talk about a comparison between minority population and poverty in a bit. It's slightly greener, I think. Yeah,
The east side is low income, but mostly white.
I guess so. That's what the data is showing.
Here.
Here's the unemployment rate. Again, the highest is purple. Lowest in this case is the wider. So the darker it is, the higher the unemployment rate. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I know this is, let's see here. So highest unemployment again. And I'll tell, and I don't know if I really bring this up, but the last time I did like a real critical look at the city, this area is the worst off of the city. The North Street area has one of the highest poverty rates, has one of the highest unemployment rates, has one of the, so on and so on. So we have spent some CDBG money in there, putting in trash cans, putting in community centers, stuff like that to try to help with that. But you can see there's spikes in other areas, but it is concentrated in the downtown area. And as you get further out, the unemployment decreases. Okay, poverty distribution. So ironically, what's weird is the low income distribution is not necessarily the same as the poverty distribution, but here the most impoverished parts of the city are right in that core area, North Street, and then going into downtown. That is the most impoverished, impoverished part of the city. And of course, West Side is the least impoverished. I think everyone would be like, duh. I mean, yeah. So I found this. I thought this might be interesting. Where is the highest percentage of non-English speaking population? So similar to that 2% before. Not really concentrated in any one particular area, but we do see it here in the downtown and parts of. I'm not the greatest on districts, so get me correct on this. So this is part of the first ward going up. This is weird because of the golf course. That kind of skews some numbers around there, but and then the Broad Ave area over here, not too far from Fairview. Why is it concentrated there? I don't know. If I was going to guess why they're there, more than likely, again, refugees and migrants who may not have had time to learn English might be moving in with family, friends who are living there. So it's entirely possible if you did an analysis of foreign born, you would see that the same thing that would match up with that. All right. I figured we would talk about the floodplain too, because that is important. So when it comes to HUD projects, we do need to worry about the prelim. This is not the adopted floodplain. This is what FEMA calculated that we have not yet adopted. It's a lot broader than the existing one. If things are in the 100-year, well, pretty much the entire river is now floodway. Yes, that makes sense. It's a little bit wider than the river itself. So some parts of the banks, the 100-year now stretches up that one creek into the first ward. And I think we've talked about it before. It's a buried creek, I believe. Yeah, it runs underground. And then there's another creek over here on the east side. I'm not sure exactly where, but, and you can see, obviously, this building did flood in the last flood, and you can see that that's also in the floodplain. So this is all due to the decertification, I believe, of the existing floodplain walls and barriers. So whenever we do a project in the preliminary floodplain, we have to take extra steps. We have to see if there's alternatives. We have to do things like if it's a home rehab, we may end up elevating appliances. So just be aware of it. We can do activities there, but it's more complex. And it's one of those kinds of things where you have to ask yourself, I can do 3 projects outside the floodplain or 1 in the floodplain. But then again, you think about like social justice aspects of that. Is it fair? What if someone is poor and lives in the floodplain? They simply cannot afford to move. So, take that, balance it, however you want to take and process this. And I decided, hey, well, we're showing the floodplain. Why don't we show the last flood? Not too off from where the floodplain was. You can see that buried creek here had a lot of flooding from 2011. The 72, what is it? The 72 one's on top. How many remember the 72 flood? How dare you ask that question? The 2006 got a little bit broader. You had some flooding over here. Well, that's kind of that's out of the city. But yeah, the 2011 really hit the first ward. It hit this part around Tompkins Street, really just, I think it went past the flood walls. Is that what it was? It went over them or overtopped them? Was that it? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that got flooded. So, it's one of those things, and I was working at the town of Union when this happened, and even before then, where FEMA said, hey, we've got these new floodplain maps, maybe you should adopt them. And everyone called their congressperson and said, no, my flood insurance will go up. And they're like, okay, we won't implement it. And then a few years later, this hit. So now, if you got hit and you're not in the 100-year floodplain, I think it's more difficult to get floodplain insurance, but you'll have to have floodplain insurance in case you get flooded again, or FEMA won't help you. So it's a complex thing. One thing we can do with CDBG funds and home funds to some degree, there are different flood-proofing projects we could end up doing. Now, these are larger projects, so I don't think we're going to take care of them in a year. But one example, and I've heard this talked about in other cities, is uncovering the creek. So you're basically increasing the channel that one creek in the first ward's doing. There's also underground catchment areas you can install as well. They did that at the mall. I think we did that as the town of Union. You can't really build the flood walls. That's kind of Army Corps stuff. They get mad if you go over there and start putting things on their walls, even if they failed, ironically. But you can do things like, like I said, elevating structure, or you can elevate structures. That's very expensive, but elevate utilities. You can do flood proofing if it's not too bad. The YMCA in Westover? Yeah, Westover. Has these really cool things the town of Union gave them, which were like these drop logs, so that you could drop them in the doorways. And they only need to go up like 3 or 4 feet because that's all they got flooded. So you have an emergency plan, you can buy these. So install, it's not too expensive to install that kind of stuff. And as long as you don't have a lot of other holes in the building, you can actually flood proof your buildings like that. Now, you can't do that everywhere. It all depends on how deep it's expected, but these are options that are available. Yes. Correct. If you're not in the existing floodplain, well, first off, if you don't have a mortgage, you don't have to get floodplain insurance, even if you're in the floodplain. If you have a mortgage, that's from a federally backed thing. See, that's gonna fall back on the stuff I went to school for. If you have, unless they change the rules, if you have a mortgage that's backed by a federal loan or federal bank, you have to have floodplain insurance if you're in the 100-year floodplain. I think some lenders will also require you to get floodplain insurance no matter what. But then again, it's based off the mortgage company. So the federal government never requires you to get floodplain insurance. It would be a mortgage company that requires you to get it. But if you do not have floodplain insurance and you get flooded, FEMA goes, you got one, that's it. So if you get flooded again and you don't have floodplain insurance, FEMA will say, we feel really bad for you. And then they walk away. And that's unfortunate. The preliminary floodplain impacts HUD projects that go into the preliminary floodplain. It doesn't stop them altogether. I'll give you an example of one we did not too long ago. The Boys and Girls Club, somewhere over here. They installed a gazebo sort of shelter in their back parking lot, which is lower. That lower part is in the prelim. Okay. Wait, why is it not letting me go? No, that's not where I want to go. Okay. Yeah. So that new shelter is in the prelim. So when we did the environmental review for it, they don't have to get flood insurance because they're not in the existing floodplain. Fair enough. But because we were putting HUD dollars into this sort of shelter, we had to go through a process of trying to identify other locations. We had to do an ad in the paper saying, does anyone object to this? Does anyone, is there any worries? I don't think we'd had any like construction requirements, mainly because it was 4 open walls. So there's no, I might have, if they had a couple of enclosed walls, said, can you have breakaway walls? As part of the mitigation, but I mean, it's a gazebo with like 4 legs. The water's gonna come in, the water's gonna go out, But we had to go through this whole rigmarole process to get it approved. And that just happens for any projects that end up, any capital projects that end up in the preliminary floodplain. We have to go through these sort of extra steps. We're working on Chodo with First Ward. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to do that for, a bunch of those houses. Probably in that case, they're gonna have to elevate utilities up to a certain level above either the base flood elevation based on the prelim or did that area get let's find out. Okay, that area didn't really get too flooded during the last one. But they will have to do something about being in the prelim about utilities. So any other questions about the floodplain? I could talk about floodplains all night. I went to school specifically for floodplains. Okay, so housing stock. All right, so I'm not going to read all these numbers, but we have about 25,000 housing units, which has gone up since last year. Roughly 2 people per household. That's also gone up. Of the housing units, let's see here. Oh yeah, so of the 25,000, approximately 21,000 are occupied and the rest are vacant. Vacancy rate is about 16%, which is up from previous years. Now, I'll tell you something interesting we found out when we did this, when I was doing the data. The housing units actually increased. This hasn't happened in a while. We haven't had an increase in the number of housing units in a while. We're still unsure as why. I talked to planning about this. Our estimation is that the ACS based their information on projects that are going through planning. So some multi-unit housing, some people taking units and splitting them into multiple units. And I suggested, could it also be illegal units? Yeah, it could be. People illegally subdividing. But however you want to say it, according to the ACS, the number of housing units actually went up for the first time in years. Now, almost all of those were vacant. So that's kind of the offset. So of occupied housing, most occupied housing is rental at 56%, which has gone down, which is a good thing because that means that the homeowner rate's increasing. That's a good sign. So both homeowners that are in poverty and renters that are in poverty have gone down, which is good as well. But this number was pretty big last year, and I think you guys took notice. So 3% of homeowners are in poverty. 44% of renters are in poverty. So if you're a renter, 2 out of 3 renters or so are impoverished in the city.
Wait, what?
Yeah. What about the vacancies? Unknown. I just know that they're not condemned. They've not been removed as residential units. So they've not been like demolished. They are listed at one time as being housed. Now we may go into some of these, the vacant property, John Westgate, our vacant property officer might go in, Cole might go in and say, look, this building is falling apart. We have a bunch of demos coming up. So that will reduce that vacancy rate, but, yeah, it's difficult to tell just from the raw data, the state of the vacant units. Any other questions? Vacancy or rentals or? Hey Deb, what's up?
Question concern regarding the vacant, and I've had discussions with that particular officer. And in my opinion, if you're giving a specific address where it is very obvious that people are getting in, wouldn't that kind of bring that to the attention of that department as well as the police? Now, are we having SUPTED meetings? Are you aware of that? Is anyone from your office going to those anymore? Because to me, that's what happened on Henry Street with 2 fires, and we don't need
Uh-huh.
loss of life
Yeah.
to
I-
also endanger occupied structures. But I was just curious how or what your radar is within City Hall, how that's being handled.
I'm a very secluded person, so I don't talk to too many people if I can help it outside of my immediate, in fact, outside of my office, like literally my office, that I can close the door and keep it.
I was gonna just
Um,
say something, to Deb's thing. I know that like, I was talking about I know on Robinson Street, that's a problem too, or like vacant houses, but a lot of the time it's like a legal thing. So like, Corp Council has to get involved first, like if it's like a vacant home, Corp Council has to get involved with the owner, if the owner might be deceased or the estate, just for the city to obtain that before they can even knock it down. So I do know that there are a lot of rules and a lot of things when it's legal, it takes a little longer to get it. Cause I mean, a little longer for it to get it moving, but I do know that people do complain about a lot of the buildings that are vacant.
You're absolutely correct, but what my concern is, it's not to the level of court counts at that where you're speaking of.
Mhm.
What I'm speaking of is when sorry, I can see it in mind's eye.
Well, I can,
Property owner,
Okay.
it's already a registered vacant property.
okay.
And there is an owner or property management that is in charge of it. And it's a matter of keeping, literally sadly, reboarding up windows or doors. But I do appreciate that because that is like the next level on should it be. And if other communities, and it was on the news where I believe it's our local land bank acquired a property for 1,500 and was able to, rehab it, and it's now becoming housing, for a family. So there's got to be some way where we can go from, we need to keep it boarded up before it goes to Corp Council to demolish. That's the threading of the needle, as you would say. That's why I was just trying to speak to that part of it.
Well, I
Didn't
will.
need to make complicated.
Well, I will talk about demolitions in a second. So the city generally doesn't just grab a property and demolish it. Almost always demolitions are based off of failure to pay taxes. And then the unit is just simply, if it's determined to be unrecoverable. Now, the city in the past has taken units that are sort of fallen apart and rehabbed them and sold them to people. Beyond that, though, I'm not sure any other outreach efforts that we have. I know we've talked about things like working with not Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity, to potentially get them the properties. But if an owner owns a property and they're paying taxes on it, even if it's vacant, there's not much the city can do unless they're straight up violating codes. Code enforcement can't enter buildings without permission. So if there's squatters inside and they keep really quiet and the owner hasn't told them to come inside, then I could see squatters just kind of hiding out. And squatters have their own rights too, which is, I know, and that's a very charged type of discussion too. Have some residential rights as well, and I'm not too clear on those. And I know that when they've done vacancy reviews before, when they've gone out and tried to determine whether property is vacant, they have determined that there were squatters there. Usually the squatters go out the back door or just really quiet or whatever. So, but it can happen. It can happen.
Doesn't the city have like broken window code laws? Like, I mean,
Yes. I don't know if that's enough for the city. Like, I don't think like one broken window is enough. The city coming and
Because
condemn a property though.
I can't remember what street it is, right between Holly and Court Street, the corner, right at the corner of Court,
Mhm.
where the front's like a sort of a business on the corner, and then the house was just painted like 5 years ago and all cleaned up, but the back half of it, in a matter of 2 weeks, went from the first floor having the windows boarded up to every window all up, all the other 3 floors, all being smashed out with rocks. And the glass is just falling down onto the sidewalk, and they've done literally nothing to it.
I wonder who owns the building.
I don't
Because
know.
that's when if you see a situation like that, I would strongly recommend calling the vacant property officer because that's a sign the property's vacant. That would be my guess. And then John can go out, make an estimation, send letters out. He gives them a certain period of time to provide feedback and do the update list if they've not done it. So even if you're registered the vacant properties, they don't just sit there. You are supposed to have a rehab plan. You are supposed to have a plan in place to get that unit back into working service. So, and that, I can't give you more details about that. That would be a John question. But I know that, you know, I would help him sometimes when the mail come in with the rental requests or with people would have questions about getting on the vacant property registry. So Jonathan Westgate, he is the vacant property officer. Westgate.
And don't forget the city earns money. There is a fee,
Yes.
that they must pay on an annual basis, that helps to support that position.
To support and encourage them to get the property back in a working condition. Yes. It's a soft stick. All right, homelessness. Unfortunately, Rebecca is not here because she could probably talk circles around me on this. So I will do as best I can.
She's watching.
She's watching. Hi. So anyway, homelessness numbers. These numbers are based off the 2024 point in time count, which I think took place in January. The point in time or pit count is where, for the 5-county area of the COC, volunteers from the COC literally will go out and count the homeless. They will go up to 10. Well, it's in January, and the reason they pick January is because most of them would be in shelters by then, but they will still go out and try to see if anyone's still outside in a tent, try to count them, try to interview them. The people that are in shelters, they try to interview them. They get basic questions, you know, age, what's your current situation, how long have you been homeless? So according to the 2024 pit and time count, in the 5-county area, so that's 5 counties. This is not just Binghamton. This is 5 whole counties. There were 746 homeless individuals at that point in time. Now, the last data I had was from 2022. I did not get the 2023 PIT, but the number then was like 300 something. So in the last 2 years, homelessness has more than doubled, almost tripled. So of that breakdown, families with children, there were 67 families with children who were homeless. There were 3 homeless children that did not have a parent. And then, so these are kind of all exclusionary, families with children, children that aren't in families, and then adults with no children. But this one's kind of hard to parse out because it's adult only. So it could be 2 or more, 1 or more adults, but without any kids. So adults only that are a household, 368 males, females 167, 1 transgender non-conforming homeless individual. Now, when you look at the percentage of the homeless that are minorities, again, non-white only, non-Hispanic or Latino, of the homeless from the PIT, 36.7 were minorities. Now, if you compare that to the population of 34%, that does mean that the minority population is slightly overrepresented in the homelessness or in the homeless population, but it's not off by a huge number. So that's not saying that any of these numbers are great. I wish our homeless numbers were 0, but it does look like the homeless minority population is somewhat close, but higher, slightly, absolutely, than the actual minority population overall. Okay, income and poverty. Okay, so poverty is not the same as low mod income, and I'll say this probably a few more times. So of the residents, 32% of the population are in poverty. So 1 in 3 people in the city of Binghamton are in poverty. The percentage of residents near poverty, and that's 100 to less than 150% of the poverty level, is 11%. So add those together, you have 43% of the population in the city of Binghamton is either at or in poverty, or near or in poverty, which closely corresponds to 41% of the children in the city of Binghamton are in poverty. Only 17% of the elderly are in poverty. So And I don't have any numbers from previous years to compare this to. I don't know why, or they were the exact same. There was no change. Single parents in poverty. This one is kind of interesting. 45% of single parents are in poverty. And of that population, 4 in 5 are female head of household. So single mothers represent 4 in 5 of the single parents in poverty. I did have to double check that, but yeah, there are male head of household single parents that are in poverty as well. So that's the poverty breakdown. So then the minority population in poverty. So the non-minority population in poverty is 25%. The minority population in poverty is 44%. Those are obviously skewed, indicating a higher rate of poverty for minority population. However, I want to point this out, and we've run into this before. HUD programs cannot be gated to any group based off race or ethnicity, or actually I should say religion as well. You can gate HUD programs on age, either high or low. You can gate programs on income, and certain other ones, say veterans or something like that, but you cannot gate based off race or ethnicity. We ran into that with a program that was providing minority business owners grants to expand their businesses. So I had to work with the BLDC and said, well, what other programs would still qualify that anyone else could qualify for? So we work with them on that. And we did find a similar program that was similar to the one that these groups were graduating from, that would allow them to still access the grant. So that was that. Employment. The unemployment rate of the civilian labor force is 10%, which is slightly down and has been for the last few years, mainly since COVID. COVID kicked a big old grenade into all the economics and poverty numbers. The number of employed people in poverty is over 4,000, which is going down. But I think this is the number, because I had to take that and use that to determine this. 20%, 1 in 5 of people that are employed are below poverty. So there are ideas of what if people work? Well, a lot of them are working, they're still in poverty. And that number has increased from the previous year. Okay, code enforcement, blight, and crime. Now, I used this one last year. I'm sorry, I waited too long to get the information in time. I was not able to generate a new code violation heat map for you guys. So this is the one from 2022. It's basically showing you what parts of the city typically have the highest number of code violations. And as you can see, if you remember the earlier parts, this does broadly correspond to the most impoverished parts of the city. With, again, this one trunk line here seeming to be like one of the highest rates. And that is unfortunate. Demolitions, I was going to talk about that. Most of the properties to be demolished come from the Broome County foreclosure, which means they stopped paying their taxes after a certain number of years, went up for auction. I think the city has right to buy, and we generally will buy properties to demolish them because we don't want properties that have been foreclosed that are in bad condition for someone to come along, swoop it up for a bargain, and then turn around, do a minimal amount of rehab, if any, and then rent them out again, stop paying taxes, and 3 years later, the county forecloses, it goes up for auction, and someone swoops in and picks up the property for a minimal amount of money. That is a cycle we are trying to break. So overall, the process takes, from beginning to end, about 2 years. Once we get into the actual purchase, it can take us 4 months or half a year to go through the whole process. We have to do surveys. CAUD has to approve every demolition in the city. Then I do the environmental review, which means SHPO has to approve it. They do bids and blah, blah, blah. So. Crime rates. All right, so I grabbed this data. This is from FBI, CP. So in general, numbers have been going down. Now, 2020 did have a spike. 2019 and 2020 had a bit of a spike compared to previous years, but even since 2017, overall numbers have gone down of crime. Violent crime has gone down, property crime has gone down. 2023 is, well, it's not the best of the last several years. 2021 was probably one of the better ones for property crime, at least. But yeah, violent crime is pretty low. Closest one to that was 2018. So those are the crime numbers. Now, I did pull out specifically hate crime. I thought this number would actually be bigger. But when I did some research on that, I wanted to identify what types of hate crime I thought you guys might ask. The FBI identified both of the hate crimes in 2023 as being property damage against one, an individual or family who are Black or African American, and then the other one, other race or ethnicity. I don't have any more details than that. They literally have a category for every group, and it wasn't. So I don't know what that hate crime was for. All right, so that's the city in numbers. Does anybody have any questions, or you can discuss things or whatever? I don't have the numbers on the crime concentration, unfortunately. That was another heat map I would have been able to get to in time. You should ask about the hate crime specifically? Oh, just any crime. Okay. Oh, violent crime. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure specifically where that occurred, or the property crime, unfortunately. Any other questions? And you guys can also talk amongst yourselves on, are there ideas or plans, or, will this affect the goals you guys want to set in the con plan? Are there further questions you have? I mean, you had the question about, maybe I can look up the heat map of the crimes.
Deborah, question?
Heat map crimes.
Yes, this goes to funding, and Columbus Park obviously is within the mapping area. One of the things we've lost in the last few years is our Little League team. Can CDBG funds be utilized to assist with that? I do know the rec center, it's so exciting that that's going to be developed, but it used to be through the Parks Department. Can any funds be used to assist other teams as well for youth programming?
Okay, so youth programs of almost any kind, as long as most of the kids are low income. So 51% or more of the kids are, if they can prove that they're low income, that program would qualify. If it's in the city of Binghamton, as we saw the number of impoverished kids, very likely that will occur. Yes, it is an eligible activity. It counts though as service. And I'll just let you guys know, service funding is going to be very strict. We're not going to use program income for service funding calculations. So the amount of money you have to budget for services is going to be much lower than last year. That was due to an issue we had with HUD. So that's already a shrinking pool. So it's one of those things that, yes, it's eligible, but then you're going to have to compare and see, what agencies do you not want to fund if you wanted to fund that? And it's not an easy question. It never is. I know the mayor has focused somewhat on youth programs. I don't know if you guys as a group want to recommend, hey, let's fund let's do youth, because that's how we stop kids from going down the wrong path. That's what you guys want to do. That's your recommendation. Absolutely. I understand that. But understand, when you get the applications in, it's going to be tight this year, deciding who does and does not get funding. I'll just tell you that.
If I may, Steve, are there projects in the city that, either recently or historically have been held out as having, even if they're not HUD funds, if having a quantifiable change in that particular area? What is the gold star of Binghamton projects throughout the years?
Now, are you talking about CDBG funded only?
No, and anything, just to kind of get thought on what sort of projects have shown to change communities.
I will say probably one I think is one of the more impressive ones would have been the Vines Garden. They took some flood property down here and they turned it into not the community garden, they turned it into a farm that now provides food for, they do sell some of the food, but they also provide food for low income people. You can use the WIC or SNAP or whatever or EBT to pay. I don't know all the different acronyms. That's DSS. But you can use those kinds of things to get these fruits and vegetables they grow. So I think that they took an area that was devastated by a flood, turned it into a garden farm, and now provide food to the residents of the city. And I think, and that they also manage a lot of the community gardens in the area, which I understand a lot of people are proud of. I don't know if any of you use the community gardens, but that's something I know a lot of people are proud of. Other than that, we have done community centers. The NOMA Community Center, we've helped fund, what was there's another community center, and I can't remember where it is, that we helped fund service programs a few years before. We're always helping the Boys and Girls Club. So a lot of youth programming's helped that way. Now, are you talking about capital projects or service projects? Or both?
You know, I was mainly thinking of capital projects,
Okay.
but I mean, service projects as well, absolutely. But, you know, I guess they're a little bit more fluid in terms of who uses them.
Yeah.
You know, if we're trying to change some of those areas, some of the colors on the map, you know, capital
Yeah.
projects are, I guess,
Ones that
What-
actually help the colors on the map. Let me think. I guess some of our economic development activities, they can help get people into jobs. Again, like I showed, not just because you have a job doesn't mean you're out of poverty, unfortunately. And the restrictions on HUD funding for economic development, economic loans isn't a guarantee that someone's going to be pushed out of poverty, mainly because the jobs have to be for low income people or available for low income people. So, you know, it's not like they're going to take, you know, someone who is homeless and put them into a Michelin star restaurant and they're making $100,000 as a chef. You know, they're probably going to, you know, more likely it would be a restaurant that would hire someone as kitchen staff or front house staff or something like that. That's fairly typical. So those projects can affect income. Like I said, I like vines. They also get the kids from the area to help grow this stuff, so the kids learn job skills and stuff like that. Trying to think of any other capital projects. We do a lot of parks funding, but would that have an impact? I'm not sure. Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure. Vines would be the only one I would have a go-to that would have a measurable effect. Wait, nope, just suck in you. All right, so one project we did work with was with CPI and Broome County Council Churches for the Greater Good Grocery, the State Street project. So that was one. That one's had a major neighborhood effect, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Providing food in a food desert, especially with Kmart closing. It's providing housing in that area. That's a really good one too. I completely forgot about that. So those kinds of projects are great for that kind of revitalization type thing. Anyone else?
Any other questions, concerns? Something you want Stephen to find the answer to? No?
Just one final question, Stephen. The home ownership, the first time home buyers.
Yeah.
I've been talking with people that are interested in it.
Oh.
Is there some way we can do a push, or is there an area on the website that I can direct them to?
I think we have a link for it on the city website. The main thing right now is you call Metro. That's the start. Metro Interfaith is the start for it because they have to do the training program. So that's actually, I'll say that coupled with the rehab program using home and CDBG are other great ways of sort of improving the neighborhoods, because we take housing and we do a lot of siding and roofs. We do housing that's sort of dilapidated that can push down neighborhood prices. So you go in, we can revitalize them. We can take a vacant property that's in good condition and get a homeowner using the first time homebuyer program in there. So then people are in the homes, you know, that's an investment in the community. And the rehab property is the same way. We rehab homeowner houses, and again, investment in the community. Build Chodo projects, rental rehabs. Think of the Liberty Munsell Street area there with Finn. Those are great, like residential projects, putting people in quality housing in neighborhoods that are sort of depleted. And that's a good way, and people can take pride in that. I don't know if our demolitions are sort of focused in the same way. I know we take down properties that are just basically falling apart. That can have an improvement as well, but yeah, the home improvement program, first time home buyer. Right now for first time home buyer, yeah, they'll start with Metro because we basically pay Metro to teach people to have a realistic perspective on their finances as to whether they can buy a home. And that's all to avoid what happened back in 2008. You know, you don't want people getting into homes and just being in underwater immediately. So that helps us do that, and then we can help them. We've pushed the price up to 10,000. We provide 10,000 closing cost assistance for people that qualify. So yep, that's a program that helps. And our rehab program, I think we're pushing up the amounts that we're doing for rehabs as well. So. Okay, so the question was how many people applied for first-time home ownership? So the weird thing is there's no waiting list for first-time home buyer. You just have to start with, you basically have to be almost ready to buy a house, and you call Metro and they do the training, and then we get you, we double check your income, and then Jeff in my office goes to the closing and cuts the check. I mean, it can be done in like a month. It's one of the quickest things we can do. But there's no real waiting list. It's all just whenever anyone's ready to buy a house, they contact Metros to start the process. Now, the training itself can take a little while, depending on how much you do it. A lot of it can be done online. I think some of it's done in person. Anything else?
Anything else?
Okay.
No? Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Our next meeting. Thank you. Uh-oh. All right, so we'll see you on the 30th of October. Can we do a final attendance? Let's start up with Deborah.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on 1 second.
Did we decide, do we want to start at 6:15 or 6:30?
Oh. Let's bring up new business on that and vote on that if we'd like to. We'd like to change our meeting times from 6:15 to 6:30. Do we
If
have anyone who
if
wants to
we-
make a motion for
If
that?
I have a quick question. If we say 6:30, then we start at 6:30, no matter who's
Yes.
here, as long as we have quorum.
Yes. Start at
Sorry, there was
6:30.
a difficulty this evening and I texted to make sure people knew. Thank you.
Yep. Nope, we knew. Do we have a motion to make it 6:30 or do we want to stay at 6:15?
I'll make a motion if. Okay, we'll take a vote. I'll make a motion that we start our meetings at 6:30 instead of 6:15.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 5. John's 6. Deborah? Abstain. 7. Okay, so that passes. 1 abstention.
Exactly.
Everybody else was in the affirmative. Okay, 6, sorry. I think I counted. All right, so that said, our next meeting will begin at 6:30 p.m. on October 30th here in Chambers. Let's do our final attendance and then some adjournment. Let's start up with Deborah.
Deborah Hogan, mayoral appointee.
Thank you.
Kenya Middleton, City Council Representative, Second District, and ex officio.
John Brunza, mayoral appointee.
Mary Ann Callahan, mayoral appointee.
Michelle O'Loughlin, Council at Large.
Marilyn Austin, 6th District.
Jordan Trice, 5th District.
Justin McGregor, Chair, 7th District. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Michelle, a second?
Second.
John, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Oh, Was that a vote yes? Oh, okay.